in every course of duty.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Go ahead and stop that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the Southern Branch Town Hall. It's Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm really excited to have everybody join us. We got a kind of tight agenda for tonight, and we want to keep this right at an hour. I'm going to give some branch updates. We'll go through any questions branch members might have on this call, and then we're going to jump into an interview with Ed Krintz. Just again, my name's Michael Iannuzzi. I'm the Southern Branch Chair. Really excited to speak to you guys tonight. So we'll kick it off. I have a couple different things that I want to cover. We sent out an email, and then there was, of course, a Facebook post that went out that kind of outlined all this, but I'll go through some of these updates. First is the Southern Branch Flourish Scholarship. This is a great scholarship out there that was created with the goal of developing a priority of kind of educating branch soloists and bands in music theory, instrument setup, tuning, composition, and ensemble when it comes to tenor drumming, right? So we hope that with this scholarship, we're going to raise the overall level of the midsection drumming in our region. And I think this is especially timely with the regrades that are coming up and all that other stuff. So you can definitely check it out on southernbranch.org /flourish, and you can check it out there. There's also links on the Facebook group page. So if you have any questions, feel free, you can ask us about it. We also have released a Southern Branch podcast. So we're constantly looking at ways to provide content to our members while on the go or at home. So for those that missed out last month, the branch has really incorporated a branch podcast to add with our town hall supplements. I know we've had a little break over the summer months with town hall guests and things like that, but this is really going to help provide information and conversations from guest speakers, educational information, all that stuff to our members. So the first guest that we had was world-renowned bagpiper Andrew Douglas from Dojo University. It's a great conversation that we have with him. Check it out, Southern Branch website, again, southernbranch.org, and you can find it in the podcast there. The 2021 Nickel Brown competition, congrats to the 10 grade 1 pipers who earned invitations. I think this is also kind of timely because Stuart Marshall is going to be representing the Southern Branch, and Stuart is a student of Mr. Krintz here on the call. So it'll be nice to kind of talk about that a little bit. You can find out more about that contest at nickelbrown with a hyphen in between .org. Also, another reminder about grading videos for bass and tenor. All grading videos need to be submitted by November 1st, 2021 to the music board. Please, please, please don't wait until the last moment to complete your accordion submission. This takes a long time to go through, and got to watch a lot of videos, got to write notes, got to get that back. And then ultimately it takes a good amount of time to really kind of think about the pool, and the earlier you can get it in, the better. Any further grading information and playing requirements can be found on EUSPBA.org. The EUSPBA Winter Series online contest, it's going to be announced, or it has been announced, that the first event of EUSPBA Virtual Winter Series will be held this November. Registration is ongoing until November 12th. You can check out the latest EUSPBA update for further details on the website, again, EUSPBA.org. We're also building out an educational series. It's in addition to the website that we created for the Southern Branch and social media outreach. One of the initial projects was this educational series, and this project gives our members an opportunity to dive deeper into certain repertoire maintenance items, how to on different topics. We just added a video from Vince Ayub. He's been working on a maintenance series for our members, and the first video that he uploaded was tying in a bag, which is pretty cool. There's not a lot of resources out there for that, so definitely feel free to check it out on our branch website or our YouTube channel at any time. And I think you might be able to hear one of my dogs drinking water here in the background, but please ignore that. A couple save the dates: Scotland County Highland Games, October 2nd, 2021. Entries for solos are no longer open. This is going to be a huge contest. I know Bill and the gang have been working really, really hard to pull this one off with all the challenges of COVID. I look forward to being there. I know a lot of other people are really excited about being at this games. If you see volunteers or any games organizers, make sure you thank them for their hard work, because this is definitely a large event that they're trying to pull off, and safety is their #1 concern. And you could definitely check out the Facebook page for the Scotland County Highland Games or the website. The Charleston Scottish Games is going to be on November 6th, just a reminder. And then the EUSPBA AGM 2021 is going to be virtual. It's going to be on the 4th and 5th of December. More information is going to come out soon on this year's format and items. So that is generally my update for all things Southern Branch and EUSPBA. Any questions from anybody on the line, feel free to unmute, or you can post your question in the comments. I'll give just a couple seconds for that. Going once, going twice.
Mike.
Yes, sir.
Is there an update on the status of Stone Mountain? Is it still on, or was it canceled, or?
I'm not completely sure. As far as I know, it's still on. I know that it was in a kind of invite only, and there was only a certain number of bands. They had to really contain the number of people and participants there, but I'm unsure of that. I would definitely check out their website on any up-to-date information for Stone Mountain. As far as I know, it's still on.
Hey, Mike, they've sent out the information for the soloists at this point this morning, so they are, as far as I know, doing solos and whatnot, and as far as we're concerned up in Nashville, they're still going ahead.
Yeah, everything I've heard so far is that it's still on. I haven't heard anything about it being canceled yet. So I know games are taking extreme precautions, right? Whether that's vaccination card information, temperature checks, negative COVID tests. I actually, I attended a concert here in North Carolina, and they had me show a vaccination card. They did a temperature check, and anybody that showed up without a vaccination card had to take like a rapid test right there on the site. So I know these festivals and organizations are going a long way to try and keep these things going. So definitely, I would follow any state or local guidelines, and then guidelines from the games organizers themselves, but definitely take a look on the website to have up-to-date information on that games. But as I know right now, and from what Daniel said, I think it's still on. So yeah, any other questions? Cool. All right, so we could jump in. I'm really excited to interview Ed. I know I reached out to Ed early on when we started to look at interviewing some speakers, and it's great that we could finally lock it down and have a conversation with him. I met Ed at, well, obviously probably at one of the games, but we spent a little bit of time together at the North American Academy of Piping and Drumming, and I got to see Ed teach a little bit and shadow some stuff, and it was really, really interesting. But Ed Krintz has been a performer of the highland bagpipe for over 50 years, and has studied under Pipe Major Sandy Jones, James MacIntosh, the late John MacFadyen. He's a panel adjudicator for EUSPBA, and currently teaches piping in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. That's where he started essentially the Loch Norman Pipe Band in 1996. Other notable things that I learned about Ed was that he was pipe major of the City of Washington Pipe Band from 1975 to 1978, and then 1980 to 1982. So a lot of experience under Ed's belt. He's a lover of all things bagpipes, specifically pibroch, and I'm really excited to have a conversation with him today. So Ed, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here. Let's start this off. I want to talk a little bit about how you got started in piping. Like, how did it all begin? When was this? And you know, obviously don't want you to date yourself, but I'm interested to know kind of how it all got started.
Okay, well, it really started when I was ninth grade in high school. The school that I went to, Robert E. Peary High School in Rockville, Maryland, had a pipe band. It was maybe one of the only pipe bands in the state of Maryland, high school pipe bands. Anyway, and some of my childhood friends that I grew up with just around the corner had joined the band a year or so ahead of me. And that included Bob Mead, the late Bob Mead. Oh. And yes, we grew up together, just literally houses apart.
Man.
So I'd always enjoyed the sound of the bagpipe. I had never played another instrument before starting the pipe, and it was an opportunity to have free lessons twice a week. I thought, well, I couldn't really pass this up, so I joined my friends coming up to the school on Wednesday evenings and Saturday mornings. And my first evening there, actually, Sandy Jones was the instructor at the school. He would come out twice a week and work with the band members, and so he spent about a minute staring at my fingers and not smiling as he was doing that and inspecting them, and finally said, "We'll give you a try." So So I acquired a practice tenor, and actually I bought my first practice tenor from Bob Mead for the sum of $5 because Bob had moved on to drums. And
I was gonna ask, did
yes,
Bob start on pipes, or did he start
yes, he
on?
did.
Did he always play bass?
Well, I mean, he probably spent maybe half a year or so attempting to get the bagpipe practice tenor under control, but he saw the writing on the wall, I guess you would say, and said, I think I want to try the drums. So, and was a tremendous benefit to all of us that he switched over to tenor and bass and just took it on wholeheartedly and became such a great player and instructor.
Yeah, and for those of you that are unaware, Bob unfortunately passed away this past year from complications with COVID. And I think, I remember seeing Bob when I came up to North Carolina to play with St. Andrews, and he would be judging contests, and I loved how passionate he was about the music. And then I showed up to the North American Academy of Piping and Drumming, and he was my roommate, and we spent many nights just talking and enjoying a drink and talking pipe bands and playing a little bit and jamming with Robert Mitchell and the rest of the gang. And I miss him very, very much. And I'm sure you do too. But that's crazy that you guys lived right down the street from each other and it started in school. Typically when people get started in something when they're younger, I mean, you started in ninth grade, so freshman in high school. You were a little bit more mature than some younger folks that are getting started, but was there something that like sparked inside of you after you started or soon after you started that you were like, man, I really want to stick with this? Was it playing a gig? Was it competing?
Well, I'll tell you, I wasn't a kind of a natural player in the very beginning. It was a lot of hard work for me to just learn basics, but it seemed like something that I could do. And it was a musical instrument that I enjoyed playing. It gave me some satisfaction to do that. And of course, I had the camaraderie of the other people in the band and, my friends that lived right around the corner from me. So I stuck with it, for 4 years. I was the pipe major of the band in my senior year. And after that, I went to the University of Maryland, kept playing, actually got involved at that point with a band called the Denny and Pace Pipe Band in Washington, D.C. And at that time, there were several members in that band who were also members of the United States Air Force Pipe Band, of which Sandy Jones was pipe major. So I got a chance to be around some really good players, to hear some really good music, to try and improve my playing a bit. After college, I basically stuck with what was the Denny and Pace Band at that point. And Sandy was trying to build it back into a band that was going to be competitive on the circuit. And I was kind of his pipe sergeant. For several years. And Sandy, I would say in the mid to late 70s, decided at some point that it was time for him to step down, and the band actually appointed me as pipe major from there.
How did you feel when that first happened?
I was scared because we all in the band relied on Sandy's expertise a lot for the band's growth and its success. And I didn't know at that time whether I really had the depth of knowledge, experience, and being able to handle a group of very good musicians in a good way to be able to run this band. But everyone stuck with me. And I really appreciated that. And the band went forward. I think one of the highlights of the band was when we went to Canada. either late 70s or early 80s, several times during the course of the summer, Ontario, and played in several of the band contests in grade 2, I believe it was at that point. And we actually won the season championship in grade 2. And I remember, I believe it was a contest at it wasn't Cambridge, but it was a contest in August. I remember the band went up and played, and we won the contest that day. And I think by winning it, we actually had won the season. It was a tremendous day, tremendous weekend for the band. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of pictures. I know John Quigg and a lot of the other members in the band, Bob Mitchell, and all can tell stories about that weekend. It was quite something.
That's amazing. I think of my own feelings of success around certain games, winning and competing, where you're like, you just go out there and you don't know what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we did it. And that feeling is just electric, right? Was John Quigg leading, or was Tom Key leading at that point?
I believe it was Tom Key that was leading at that point. Yes.
Okay.
John was one of the members in the line, and
yeah,
we had an excellent drum corps. We really did. It was a pretty much a match with the best corps that were up there in Ontario at that point.
No doubt about that. There was a record. I remember listening to a vinyl record when I was at St. Andrews. We had this like listening room in the Scottish Heritage Center, still there. And we were looking at drum salutes to play. And there was on that vinyl was Salute to Kit Reynolds. Mm-hmm. Were you leading the band at that time?
Yes.
That number one, you guys were ripping through tunes like super fast. I couldn't tell if it was the vinyl like speed, if it needed to be adjusted, but you're 100% correct. When listening to that drum corps play, like the speed that they played that salute at was so fast, and it was very, very clean too. So I remember Billy Geringer and I were both sitting down listening to it, and we're just like, this is insane how clean and how good this is. So you're I mean, I completely agree with you, but that album was a big influence for me when thinking about composing and listening to music in general. So thinking a little bit about influences, right? Because like obviously that album was an influence for me. What was some of your biggest influences? Obviously, you had some great teachers, including Sandy and John MacFadyen. And I'm interested in other influences that you had when you started really getting your teeth into piping and drumming.
Well, I would say, I would go almost religiously up to Ontario, up to Toronto, for the indoor contest, and that used to be like Easter weekend each year. And I would drive up through usually it was rain and snow, but I would go to compete. I think I was actually playing in the professionals at that point in the early 70s. But more important, I would go to listen, because there were players such as Bill Livingston. Oh my gosh. There were a couple other good names. Bob Worrell was playing at that point. Some really good players who were getting instruction from John Wilson, who was a big influence up there, from John Cairns, Seamus McNeil, John MacFadyen, John McClellan were all coming over to that part of the hemisphere to teach on a regular basis. And those players were just soaking up that music. Well, I wanted to listen and see what was going on, to see who was playing what and how they were playing it. So spent a lot of time listening to the good players, see how they set their instruments up, see how they approach their music, both in light music and in pibroch. And I learned quite a bit from that.
Yeah, I think, in the past, 10, 15 years of playing with competitive pipe bands, one of the biggest things that I found to be really successful for players is like put yourself around other good players, right?
Yes.
And especially, I mean, my first time going up to Canada, or my first time going to Winter Storm, right? Like you see players that like we just don't see in the Southern Branch, right? And sometimes you'll get people to come over, people from the program in Dunedin, but obviously those folks have gone and played with other great players that are up in that part of the world, and That's interesting. So do you think that your growth as a player, a teacher, a pipe major was expedited by going out to places and hearing those great players play that were playing just like their teachers that came over from the UK and Scotland and things like that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's something that every aspiring player out there, piper or drummer, really should try and do more of. Go and listen to the good players doing performances, whether it's recitals or contests, because you can learn so much. You really can. It's not like you're paying for a lesson. You're just soaking up what the really good styles are out there. And you can learn from that. You can always learn from that. So I just recommend to everyone to try and do that more. Yes, I think it helped me quite a bit in terms of being a better player, soloist. Certainly listening to the top bands. I remember going to the CNE, the Canadian National Exhibition, in the early or the mid 70s, when all of these top grade 1 bands from Scotland came over to compete against the Canadians and the Americans in Toronto. And that was really the beginning of the medley contest concept. So I was on the field in the CNE listening to these top bands come out there and play the first of these medleys. I was there the year that the Guelph Pipe Band beat all the top grade 1 bands in the Marshall Span Reel. I was out there listening to it. I still have a cassette recording of that, as a matter of fact. So, but anyway, you learn from all that. You get to hear what makes a really good band. Items like unison playing, like playing with pulsing, like playing, in terms of an ensemble basis, so that snare section, bass and tenor section and pipe section are all rhythmically locked in together throughout the entire course of the performance. Paying attention to those things, and knowing exactly what the levels are for your particular grade, in terms of those types of aspects of performance to consider, and striving to make sure that you're reaching and sometimes even going beyond the expected levels for that particular grade in those aspects.
Thinking about that and kind of branching off what you're speaking of, and just thinking about, like, obviously, like the birth of medleys, right, in the 70s when you went up to Canada and you heard some of that, and then medleys now. I mean, what are your thoughts when you hear some of the great bands now executing on these beautiful medleys? I mean, even we started with City of Dunedin playing in Maxville in 2019, and just the harmonies, the break into that second jig where they all go back into unison and then beautifully spread apart and go back into harmonies, and then that speed up right out of the slow air. I mean, it's just like the boundaries are constantly being pushed. But what do you love about kind of like the progression of the medley right now, since we're on that topic?
Okay, good. Well, I tell you, as I said, I was on the field when these bands were playing their first iterations of medleys. And it was interesting because, a lot of times there was not complicated music. I mean, you were still playing small strathspeys and reels and small marches sometimes, and hornpipes and jigs. But there were bands like the City of Toronto Pipe Band that came out, used a ground or a variation from a pibroch in their medley. That was absolutely unheard of at that time. And they pulled it off very, very well. But now you hear bands with, I would probably say, a higher quality of average player in the band than what we were hearing back then. Although there were really top-notch players back there in the 70s too. I mean, no slouches there. But I'd say today we've got some players in the bands that are really top-notch players, and they teach other players in the bands that reach those same levels, so that you've got a quality of unison, you've got a quality of overall technique, and I'm talking about all 3 sections, pipe section, snare section, tenor and bass, that everyone is extremely well versed in what they're doing. And, you know, the finished product, as we can hear, is just absolutely amazing. I'm amazed sometimes that judges can actually sort out the small things. I mean, we're talking about very small things between some really stellar performances and come up with a result. And sometimes I'm sure those judges, if they could give 2 or 3 first places, they would do that, because it's so hard to nitpick sometimes, just quality performances.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, anybody that listens to the World Pipe Band Championships, like you'll hear like if you can even hear little mistakes, you know, a trailing drone or something like that. But I mean, you see bands make those mistakes still and still win. It's incredible. Think about the band size, right? So the first time you heard those medleys, right? What was the size of the band that was going out?
Probably 8 to a maximum of 12 pipers, and snare line was probably 4 to 6, no more than that, I would imagine. And then a tenor or 2 at the most with the bass. So, you know, you've got a band of probably 15 to 20 players out there on the field. And now what do we have? I mean, we have 16 to maybe to over 20 pipers, snare of 10 in a lot of cases, you know, and 3 or 4 tenors and a bass and maybe 2 basses sometimes. So they're going out there with 35, almost 40 players. So, I mean, the band sizes is almost doubled. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. And tenors, I mean, it's not uncommon to see, you know, 7 tenors in a line. It's not uncommon to see 11 snares, because that was kind of the standard at some of the championships that I would see, and I would count, and I'm like, there's 5 on each side of that lead drummer. That puts them at 11. Like they're ripping, right? And the unison is incredible, even with that size. But not only that, but like the sound, right? How big that sound is. It's very, very impressive. So, but it's interesting, right? Like, how many bands would you say were in contest up in Canada when you saw them? Because they were smaller, I'd imagine that there were more, right? Now we're kind of dwindling down, but the bands are huge. What do you think about that?
Right. I think back in the 70s and 80s, when I was, you know, actively competing with bands up and going to Toronto and then the other contests up there, if there were 5 or 6 grade 1 bands, that was a good show. And sometimes there were more. And of course used to be a couple of grade 1 pipe bands here in the Eastern United States that would go up. One was Jimmy Carr's band. And I forgot the name of the band right now, but you know, it was a tremendous band, and that band went to Scotland. I know that, and took prizes over there, as a matter of fact. So you know, in the United States, there were some good quality bands here, but I think that yes, there's been a reduction in bands in number of bands that are showing up in some of the upper grades. I think it's actually expanding in some of the lower grades though, which actually could bode well for the future. If those lower grade bands, some of them, you know, not all perhaps, but some of them can rise to the top and move up and keep going and keep the drive going. That's a very difficult thing to do as a band, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
You know, to sustain the drive, sustain the initiative to want to be better and better, and to, you know, make your next performance even better than your last performance. To sustain that over a number of years is a difficult thing to do. I honestly applaud every band that is able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the programs. I mean, I remember growing up in Florida, I started playing when I was about 10, 11 years old in a band called the Lee County Pipes and Drums in Fort Myers, Florida, and then got involved with Harp and Thistle. But I remember the first time I went up to Dunedin and looking at that program, and it was like, just like one after the other. And this is when Sandy Keith was like, I think really, really in his prime, having multiple bands, right? Like keeping everybody in it, and then just producing just people going up from elementary level to middle school band, to the high school band, to the community band, right? And it just like that machine was just, for me at 11 or 12 years old, like there was nowhere on earth I wanted to be more than that place, just because I was so obsessed with piping and drumming. But you know, being a couple hours away, and my parents being Italian, and like, what are you doing? You know, they were supportive of it, but they didn't really, they're like, yeah, we're not moving to Tampa. Right. And I was just so beat up over it because I wanted so badly to be a part of that program. But thinking about the way things are kind of changing, right? This like looming kind of ghost over our ability to go out and play. I mean, if you think about bagpipes, they're like a super spreader of COVID, right? Because we're blowing tons of pressure, you know, 35, 40 PSI worth of pressure, and we're just blowing air out. You know, COVID spreads that way. Like, how do you think COVID has impacted the piping and drumming world? And like, what do you think is the new world that we're in when it comes to games and playing and things like that? Because this, and I know this is a challenging question.
Well, you know, I think this is kind of a sobering statement, but I think we're probably going to lose a percentage of players simply because they haven't had that spark, that drive to keep going on their own, because bands have had to not meet for over a year, and you know, the difficulties with trying to sustain something on your own. You know, if you're not a solo player, if you're just a band player, that's difficult. So I think we probably lost some percentage, and that's a shame. That really is. I suspect because of that, we're probably going to lose a few bands, unfortunately. Now, whether the loss of some of those bands means that maybe some other bands pick up players and become larger and better bands, I would certainly hope so, because I would hope that everyone who has been able to maintain some level of playing can get back into things in some way, shape, or form. I think going forward, I think everyone obviously has got to be careful, at least in the now and today, to be especially careful what they do in terms of social distancing, in terms of not necessarily having people pick up your bagpipe and play it, you know, or maybe even some aspects of having someone tune your bagpipe, you know, being careful of that. In other words, thinking about what you're doing before you do it. We're obviously in that sort of a situation right now in this country, in a lot of different terms. But I think that too, I think there's going to be a chance for players, and I could talk about pipers right now. This is a chance for pipers to become better instrumentalists and people who can tune their own instrument better. You know, rather than relying on your pipe major or your instructor to tune your instrument for you from contest to contest, you know, it's going to be more up to you as a player to do that. Now, there are lots of things out there that can help you. You've got lots of tuning meters. You've got apps that work as tuning meters. You've got these two things right here that, with a little education and a lot of listening to what really sounds correct and what's right, your ears can go a long way towards building a better instrument. And that comes from experience.
For sure. Now, I want to switch gears here in a minute, but, you know, I think, you know, I hear of bands that are struggling to put numbers out, or they're missing, you know, one shy of the minimum to go out and compete. I mean, what are your thoughts around that? I know my perspective is like, just put it out there. And when I talked to Michael Gray a couple months back, when we had him on the town hall, he was like, look, just go out and play. Like, we haven't been able to play for so long. Just go out and do it. Like, even if it's not as good as you want it to be, like, just do it. And I'm interested your thoughts. I'm sure you probably echo the same.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I would say go play. If you're a player short,
Just do it.
yeah, just do it. Just do it, because the benefits of everyone who is going to be there, in terms of being able to play, to experience playing together again, and to feel good about the performance, and to learn from it, and to listen to other performances, hopefully good performances, and learn from them. I mean, all the good things outweigh the bad, for sure. So I would say, by all means, go and play.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's switch gears, because I know we're getting to the back half of the hour. Talk to me a little bit about how you coach people to prepare for competition, whether this is solo or band. And I think if you could speak to, talking to Stuart, right, to go into the Nickel Brown last year that he ended up winning, and then winning the clasp this past year, and then also going to Grandfather Mountain and winning, top piper prizes. Like, I mean, how do you prepare for contests? Because I think this is a huge thing for both pipers, drummers, and any musician that's going into competition.
Okay, well, with Stuart, it was 1% me and 99% him. Trust me, he did the work, and I applaud him. My job was really to kind of steer him in the right direction and keep him from sliding off to one side or the other. But a lot of that has to do with listening to your instructor, understanding when they try to suggest adjustments that you need to make in your playing, whether it's tempo or whether it's expression or execution. Take those suggestions to heart. Work on them. Make those weak points into strong points. One of the most frustrating things for I think an instructor is to have a student that you work with them 1 or 2 weeks on a particular aspect that they're not quite getting. And you think that they've got it. So then you come back and work on something else the next week, and then you have them play something, and guess what? The first thing pops back up again. It's kind of like whack-a-mole a little bit. So when you try and fix something, get it fixed up here, and then you get it fixed in here. But make sure it gets fixed in here. Otherwise, the fingers are going to do what they're going to do, and fingers can easily slip back into old ways. So when you make an adjustment, try and make that a kind of a semi-permanent adjustment.
Yeah,
it's only going to make you a better player to do that.
Yeah, when I think about running a drum corps, it's almost like a checklist, right? Like, it's like, okay, if we're playing an MSR, it's like, okay, in the march, don't rush the second endings. Make sure the flams are nice and open. Make sure the buzz rolls are nice and tight, and you're not playing louder than the person next to you, right? Open up the single runs. Like, there's that checklist that you go through in your mind, and you're like, okay, I'm ready, right? How do you combat nerves?
That's a very difficult thing. For me, I mean, I was a very nervous player in my early years competing. But I kind of got over it, I think, just from really sheer numbers of performances that I played in, and saying, okay, I'm going to do my best, and I'm not going to worry about it. And if I felt that I did my best, then I felt comfortable when I was out there. If I wasn't comfortable, then I knew I wasn't going to do it very well. So it's always better to feel positive about things than to feel negative about things. And I think if you can take a positive mindset when you go out to compete, I think you're going to do better. And I think in a lot of instances, those nerves will leave you because you feel confident, you know that you can do this, and you in fact do well.
Yeah. I think I was listening to, I can't remember if this was a discussion that was had in person or if I was listening to maybe an episode of Pipeline. They were talking to Bruce Gandy about how, or maybe it was his son, but they were talking about how you prepare for competition and like work on the nerves. And mentally, the feedback was, it's just another performance, right? And we have performances where we play maybe at a pub, or we play, you know, at some type of gathering that's not competition. And it's like, man, we're so relaxed, we're just having fun. But then, you know, I know so many players that go out and compete and they just like, they're so good, but then they just kind of cripple under the pressure. You know, I think two things are just, it's just another performance, and just go out there and play. And especially after COVID, right? Just get out there and play, especially drummers, right? Just go out and play. And then two is like repetition. If you do it enough times, it becomes muscle memory, and then you can really finesse it and start thinking more about it. But, you know, shifting gears again, you know, as a pipe major, when, especially for lower grade bands, it's always very attractive to play aggressive tunes, right? How would you recommend go about selecting tunes for maybe a grade 5, grade 4 band that's just getting out there on the field? Because there's a huge group of them, especially going to Scotland County. There's a lot of grade 5, a lot of grade 4. How would you go about selecting tunes for a band like that?
Okay, for grade 5 and grade 4, and grade 5 has got a march medley. I mean, I would, as a pipe major, I would assess what the real level of the playing level of your, at least your pipe section is, and your drum section, I would say. Do not pick tunes that are too challenging. Do not pick tunes that involve a lot of short dot cut dot combinations, where quarter note and eighth note combinations are much easier to play in unison by all cores. I would say one good thing that I think pipe majors can do is not to be a slave to the Scots Guards book or other books of music in terms of technique, because you're probably going to have players in your band that can't handle all that technique at the tempos that you want to play. So making small adjustments, taking out a doubling, just make it a single grace note, or making it, or having no grace notes on that particular note. So at least the player can hit the big note with everybody else without having to worry about all the technique. You can make players that it's sometimes you feel pull the band down, you can bring those players up so that they lock in with everyone else. And that's what you want in terms of a good, solid performing band. Everyone plays together in really good unison. The technique will come later on, but adjusting technique sometimes in scores so that everyone can be comfortable when they compete. I don't think that your competition music should be the hardest music that the band plays. I should think that it might be some of the more simpler stuff, because everyone will be confident then, and everyone will lock in together and will play better out on the field. And I think that goes for the pipe section as well as snare section and tenor and bass. I'll tell you, some of the nicest ensemble performances that I've heard involved snare sections playing fairly simple compositions, but playing them absolutely together and locked right in with pipe sections, and tenor and bass doing exactly the same thing. You know, it doesn't have to be tremendously technical to be a winning score.
There's a couple really powerful things you just said there. I think the one that really stuck with me is your competition set shouldn't be the most technical music or complicated music that you play, which is, I'm sure any band members that are listening to this, if they think about the competitive tunes that they play, probably is the most complicated stuff that the band plays, right? That's number one. Number two, I think less is more. Like you're saying, like simplify some of the movements in the pipe music. Same thing with drumming, right? One of the most powerful things I heard John Quigg say was, we were at the camp and he was talking about a 3/4 score that he played. And he's like, this score is not special because of a blast or flurry of notes, but the lack of notes in some spaces that really makes the dynamic range for the piping stand out, right? And, you know, I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, damn, he's right, right? And it just gives a minute to like relax, and then the snares come back in, and of course you accompany with tenor and bass, and it just makes such a great dynamic effect than just blasting through. And I think you're totally right about that. So kind of piggybacking off of that, like what are some of the biggest mistakes you see happening with bands or in solos that like just like keep happening, that you're like, look, like if we could get rid of this, it would be great, and it would help people perform a little bit better?
Okay, well, things like starts, where you got early E's or overblown E's, or sometimes, you've got a double toning tenor or bass. Those things are difficult to deal with. They don't enhance an introduction, obviously, but rehearsing as a band, your introductions, so that everyone is blowing the notes in tune and knowing how to blow those notes in tune and sustain them. Everyone in the, at least in the pipe section, practices starts so that they know the sweet spot on their bag to hit, so that that bass drone doesn't double tone. And those places are there, trust me. I was working with a fellow at the piping school this past summer, and he was having trouble with double tones, and he was blaming it on the reed. Well, it really wasn't the reed. It was his striking in. He was hitting the wrong spot on the bag. And once we found the sweet spot where he could hit that bag and get the bass to go, and it would start every time, we fixed it without messing with the reed. So, a lot of it is just practice and trial and error. But once you find the right combination, practicing that so that every start is good and every start is blown the same way. If you've got an entire pipe section focused on doing that for 5 or 10 minutes at every band practice as a group, I think the results are going to show when you walk out on that field and you strike up to start your contest. Everyone, sure. Whoa, what a great start.
Yeah. And even if it's not on the field in competition, right? I think as a general band, if you're on the march, if you're on a street parade, if you're in a pub, like it really does make a huge difference. And I was at general band practice this past week with Wake, and we practiced starts and stops and starts and stops, and just making sure, like as a band, one of the biggest things, and one of the more somber moments is like we're a public safety band. We play funerals, we play memorials for a lot of the government organizations in North Carolina. And I'll tell you, like, we cannot mess that up. Like we take that just as serious as we take competition. So, I mean, just, if you treat it the same way every time and you practice like you're going to perform, I think it makes a huge difference. Before I open it up to everyone else for questions, biggest success that you feel that you've had in piping? This can be teaching, this can be playing. I know you alluded to one, taking the band up to Canada and winning in grade 2, but I'm interested in what's like the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, I did go to Scotland a couple of times to compete at some of the games over there, and I think the contest that I played in that I remember most was at Pembroke at Portree on the Isle of Skye, and it was my first year playing there. I'd been taking lessons from John MacFadyen at the North American Academy for maybe 3 or 4 years by that point. And I was somewhere in the middle of the contest in terms of when I was to play. And so I was practicing and getting my instrument ready and getting it soaked in the same deal, because it's damp over there, obviously. The judges took a dinner break for about an hour, which was a great thing. I was first on after that dinner break. So I had semi-fresh judges, at least, they weren't hungry. And I got up and played my 6/8, and I remember the Pembroke was the Flame of Wrath. And I thought I played it well. I got fairly good applause. I guess that it was the last player on in that contest, John McDougall, who actually won, and I got second. So I guess in my mind, somewhere from my performance to the end, at least in one of those judges' minds, I was pretty far up. And I felt really good about that thought. So
that's huge. And it's wild that that stuck with you, you know, through all this time. And you know, and it speaks more to you as a person too, that you didn't win, right? Like you did
Right.
second. So I mean, you definitely beat out a lot in the competition, but that stands out as like one of the most proud moments that you have. And, you know, maybe on your sheets, it explained kind of why, but, you know, knowing in your mind that like, it's always stinks going first, because then everyone else, you know, they kind of forget about you and from a judging perspective, but that is a really cool memory. I really appreciate you going through this with me and being open about all these questions that I was giving you. Some a little challenging, but I want to open it up to anybody that wants to ask a question. Feel free to post a question in the chat, or you can just unmute and ask Ed a question. If there aren't any questions, we can wrap, but I'll keep this open just for a couple minutes.
Yeah, this is not really a question, but just wanted to let you know I've always been an admirer of your playing, and we're probably about the same age, but being from North Carolina in the late 60s, early 70s, there wasn't an opportunity to hear much good playing. And that's about the time the Cross North School started up. So I was in one of the middling level classes, but I always stayed afterwards to listen to you play, and Albert McMullen, Bob Mitchell, probably later on Mike Cusack, and then I was also a great admirer of the Denny Band, not just the music they played, but they were very much a 60s, 70s band with their long hair, and they had a sort of a violet hue to the band. They wore plum orchid colored shirts, and they were just the definition of cool. And
well, a little history on those shirts. When the band was going up to Canada, we saw that the Guelph Pipe Band had started wearing, instead of white shirts, which everybody else wore, they started wearing like a light tan shirt to go with their muted Scott Tartan. And so it was actually, I believe, Paula Glendenning and Bob Mead who came up with the idea that our band could wear sort of a violet or a purple shirt. And Bob actually had all of his groomsmen wear those shirts at his wedding. I remember that very distinctly. So that was kind of the start of the shirts. And then when we got to Canada, we took a bit of a ribbing from some people, but you know, we went out and we played well. So you know, it didn't matter what color shirts we wore. And I tell you what, John, I've always respected you as a player and as an organizer of that band. And I think you did a tremendous job with the NC State band for so many years. I've always respected the band, and having the opportunity with my wife Timmy to play with the band a few years ago, that was exciting. It was very exciting.
yeah, I really enjoyed having you in the band. I appreciate that. I wish it could have lasted a little longer, but at least we had you for about one season there.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Does anybody else have any questions or statements or remarks? Waiting to see if anybody comes off mute.
I tell you, Mike, you know, you were asking about what things that I noticed that bands maybe sometimes don't get quite right. And I mentioned about intros. You know, the cutoffs at the ends, to me, as a ensemble judge, I'm always listening to whether all of the chords cut off at on exactly the same beat or off beat. And sometimes that doesn't happen. Now, whether that's necessarily intended because of the scores, I don't really know. But to me, I mean, if you're functioning as a group, you pretty much start together, you should pretty much stop together. And sometimes that's as simple as making sure that the pipe section is playing their last note to the point where they cut off exactly with the snares. And then making sure also that tenor and bass are right there with them. So everything ends at the very same time. To me, that's a good cutoff.
Yeah. And like when you think about piping too, I mean, especially in competition, like blowing through the end, right? Not only getting a clean cutoff, but also good intonation, right? Through the whole band, because if the pipes aren't quite blowing up to tone, it'll clash against the bass drum, you know, that's hitting a nice A or B flat with the bass drone, right? It can throw everything off. So I think you're totally right. Obviously, as you're coming to the end, right, having a crisp, clean cutoff. You know, Bill at SAU, we'd always say ABC, attack, blowing, cutoff, like focus on all of that. And there were things for the drum corps as well that we focused on, but they were so critical because it was like table stakes for what we were doing, right? So
Sure.
I think thinking about that is huge. But anyway, all right. We are at the hour. We are 1 minute over. I really, really appreciate you hopping on, Ed. And will we be seeing you at any of the games coming up? Will you be at Scotland County?
I will be, yes. I'll be. So looking forward.
Great. Well, look forward to seeing you there and look forward to seeing everyone else out. That'll be an awesome event. Make sure again to thank any of the event organizers if you see them and the volunteers for helping make this happen. But till next time, really appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much. Have a good night.